What's up, everybody? This is Amy here with the Nerd Cave Network, and today I'm here to talk to you about a little show called Gilmore Girls, a year in a life that Netflix just put up.
We have limited time. Should we skip the town tour?
We can't skip the town tour.
Well, we'll keep it short. There's a debate going on whether or not to take the phone booth out.
But where would Superman change when he comes to save our town from Ben Affleck?
I made the same excellent point.
I am a huge fan of the show. I've been a fan for a long time. It's so much fun. It's this really quirky show about mom and daughter, and if you're a fan of the show, I'm sure that you are just as excited about this reboot as I am. I was a little skeptical at first, just not knowing what was going to happen or what they were going to do, but I was still excited to see what was going to happen in this reboot, seeing all my favorite characters down the road and how their lives have developed and what's going on with them. This is a no spoilers video. I'm going to tell you things that are public knowledge and just kind of my opinion about the reboot. I honestly feel like it did my Gilmore Girls justice. I know this isn't the typical thing that's talked about on this channel, but it was one of the things that I nerded out about. I honestly feel like this reboot brought back that magic and that quirkiness that the show is known for and that everybody loves. The reboot, like I said, is called A Year in the Life, and it's supposed to take place 10 years after we last saw the Gilmore Girls back in 2007, after a 7-season run. I've looked online, and technically this is being listed as like a season 8, but it's sort of a reboot mini-series broken up into 4 episodes called Winter, Spring, Summer, and Fall. And the seasons are definitely a big deal with Gilmore Girls. I thought it was really cool that they did it like that. Starting off with Lorelai's favorite, Winter. She always says that snow is magic and it, brings this magical time. I'm sure if you're a fan of the show, you know what I'm talking about. It's just really interesting to see how they transition through all these different seasons, seeing where they are now. And I think the seasons was also a really cool choice because if you're a fan of the show, you know that the small town where they live, Stars Hollow, is known for their crazy festivals that are usually centered around the changing of the seasons. So I thought it was a really cool choice that they did that. I think a lot of the different dynamics and storylines that we loved were they were very present in this reboot because they brought back the original writers, the Palladino team. Amy Sherman Palladino and her husband Daniel Palladino were sort of co-writer, director, producers throughout the original series. Unfortunately, towards the end, I believe there was some disagreements with the Palladinos and the studio producing the show, so they left towards the end of the show. But I was so glad whenever I saw that Netflix and Warner Brothers was bringing them back. I think having the original writers, they are the ones that know the characters, they've made these characters, and they're the ones that know, honestly, where these characters would be in the future. They know their personalities the best, so I believe that they definitely lived up to expectations. I don't want to give away anything that is happening in the show. I definitely would recommend going and watching it, but I will say that the characters that I love, even to the smaller characters, some of the quirky people that live in Stars Hollow were still there and still the same people that I remember and that I love. Overall, I would definitely say that even though it's in a different time period, that same sort of quirky charm that Lorelai and Rory and everyone else bring to the table was definitely there. But as I said, this is supposed to be 10 years down the road. The characters have definitely evolved, but they're still the same people. I think because they have evolved, it makes them feel even more real. You know, it feels like Stars Hollow, but it's, you know, Rory has graduated from college and she's a journalist now and, you know, living her own life, but she you know, comes back to Stars Hollow and is visiting her mom and Luke. But everything still feels the same. And I loved that. You know, there was still all the weird festivals, the town meetings, of course. That's probably one of my favorite parts of the show, were the town meetings. Of course, Luke's Diner and the Dragonfly Inn. Of course, the fast-paced banter. I think that's also one of the big things about having the original writers was the Palladinos would write these scripts that were almost like twice as thick as a regular television script because there was so much quick, you know, fast-paced dialogue. And of course, that meant that the characters had to speak fast. The actors had to, I'm sure, practice that a lot. Just those little bitty details are so important because even though in a reboot you can bring back characters, but with Gilmore Girls there's definitely a very specific sort of ambiance that they create. It's all about the personalities of the characters, and in order to capture that, I think you needed to have these original writers to portray that, because, you know, even though you may have writers who can observe, you know, they can watch the show and take notes and all of that, it's still not going to be quite the same. So I'm thrilled that just those little bitty details were still there in the show. So yeah, all the fast-paced banter and lots of junk food and, of course, caffeine. One of the big things, I had to have my big coffee cup. I have a bigger one, but it's dirty. But, you know, I'm in Luke's Diner, I had to have a cup of coffee. So, as I was saying, with the reboot, it's so important that you have the characters and the personalities that you love, you know, present in the show. And I think with some reboots, it's been really hard to get all of the original characters back. Unfortunately, the father figure, Richard Gilmore, is not an active character in the show. The actor, Edward Herrmann, passed away before the filming of this reboot, and they incorporated that into the show very well, very tastefully, and I was really glad that it wasn't just touched on. It was definitely present in the show, and I don't feel like that's giving anything away because you know, it's common knowledge that, you know, he unfortunately passed away, and I believe it's important that they paid tribute to him. You know, they incorporated his death into the show, and they showed a grieving process throughout the show, especially with Emily, of course, because, you know, she's his wife. And it just made it feel even more real, and, you know, showing that even though these are our favorite characters, that they are supposed to be like real people, and real people evolve and they change with the circumstances that surround them. You know, the things that happen to us shape us and change us, and I definitely felt that in this reboot, and I really loved that. of course there were things that I wasn't crazy about in this reboot, but um, overall I feel like it did, like I said, my Gilmore Girls justice. I say that because it's just such a near and dear thing to me. It's always something I kind of enjoyed on my own. I watched the reboot a couple of times, and even though it was new stories, it still felt like the Gilmore Girls were there, if that makes sense. Just the characters that I know and love were there. And like I said, there were some elements that I wasn't thrilled about. I don't want to give anything away. There were some new elements that they brought in, but I still felt like were complementary. If you want to find out about what those are, you can check out the spoiler version of this video, where I'm going to go into more detail. I'm going to try and not overload you with detail, but there were just so many things that I was pretty passionate about while I was watching. I know Zach was watching it with me for most of it, and he said my reaction to one particular thing was just like, oh my God, like, what is happening? And of course, the big thing, if you've been following social media with this new reboot, Lorelai and Rory are specifically asking everyone not to spoil the last 4 words of the show. I won't in this video, but if you want to find out what that is, you can watch the next video. And if you have watched the reboot, comment down below and let us know what you thought. I'm really curious how Gilmore Girls fans felt about this, if they felt like it did justice to the show, if it was even necessary, if it was something that you wanted, just whatever you feel about this reboot. I'm curious to know your thoughts. And if you're not a Gilmore Girls fan, if you haven't watched the series before and you're curious about, why would they make a reboot of this show, and you're curious to watch it, I would definitely, I would recommend watching the original series first, at least some of it, to get an idea for the characters. If you go ahead and you watch this reboot first, honestly, I don't know if it would make sense to you, the different characters, but I still feel like you could get an idea of what's going on. But I would definitely encourage you to go watch the original series, and if you're a fan, definitely go watch this reboot. I think even if you're just a little bit curious, go and watch it. I honestly think it's fantastic, and it's just a continuation of the story that we love. So I'm going to leave it there for now and check out the spoiler video where we can talk about more of the details and get down to the nitty-gritty, and I'll even give you some of my speculations for different things going on in the story. So this is Amy with the Nerd Cave, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.